Alex, real quick, everyone stare at Alex. Everyone stare at Alex. Alex, what are the 3 C's?
The control corporations, consumer protection, and conservation of natural resources.
Well done. Well done. Okay, in your notes, we're going to talk about the idea of social reform during this territory this time. Have like one area which says the masculine, the other one the more feminine view of looking at the way social society should be. We're going to be talking a lot about religion because in this time in America it was almost overwhelmingly Christian. You had to frame your language in a certain way because people would listen to you. As I told Chandler last period, if you go ahead and talking about Karl Marx, people are going to think you're crazy or you're Russian. If you go ahead and talk about how Chairman Mao or Che Guevara, people will look at you like you're some freaky guy from another country. If you want to go ahead and argue for things, you have to use the cultural ethos of that country. Jefferson and Jackson or Hamilton. Or you have to go ahead and talk about special interests. And that's the context we're going to talk about today. In my projector one side. What's that? You put this under progressive reformers. Yeah. Social reform. And they show us we should be this as a country, or we should be that as a country. This is the right thing to do. No, this is the right thing to do. These deeper ideas of social reform. All right. Since I know what the first slide is going to be, I'll just go ahead and start, and then we'll see this in a minute, I hope. What you see in the progressive reformers, especially among the more feminine version, take these notes on the feminine one. You'll see people are going to sit there and say that alcohol is the devil. Whiskey is the devil. What does it do? It drives men to go ahead and waste scarce resources if you're a poor family and to drink up the family's money in alcohol. The man comes home drunk at night and beats the wife or the kids or even spousal rape. Alcohol is a huge problem for families. Therefore, it's a feminist issue. Okay? You've seen that the idea to try and get rid of alcohol and make it illegal, it's been around since the Second Great Awakening. The same with going ahead and getting women to vote. These are feminist issues from the point of view of that time, right? So what you'll see here is a drive to go ahead and make it illegal in more and more states, and ultimately, in the very high point of the progressive era, they'll make alcohol illegal in 1920. The same exact time women get to vote. It's part of the same issues for them, right? For example, you see right here, it says a home defender. You're against alcohol because you're for families, right? Alcohol is the enemy of families. So what you'll see here is this push among the feminists of this time, known as the suffragettes, to go ahead and really delineate between men and women. Everyone, pens down. Just listen. Just listen. Shanae, your parents didn't go ahead and send you to school to be a scribe, but to learn and to hear. Take only the most important things down. Nowadays, there's a huge push to go ahead and say that men and women are pretty much the same, right? Open up opportunities for women to do any job that a man can do, right? Now women are police officers, women fly fighter jets, okay? This was unheard of 60 or 70 years ago. There's this idea that men and women are basically the same. My high school psychology teacher, Mr. Marino, I remember like it was yesterday, he said, men and women are basically the same except for different plumbing. And even back in the day, I was like, I don't think it's quite that simple. And since that time, actually scientists have shown that the female and the male brains are different and there's different chemistry going on. So scientists kind of moved away from the idea of strict equality. Back in the days, though, it was the complete opposite of what we have now. People went out of their way, especially women, went out of their way to go ahead and talk about how women were so different than men, right? You did not go ahead and talk about sex openly. It's like, I think they would probably say this. It's bad enough that you have to have sex to have children, but we don't have to talk about it too. It's bad enough we have to do it. Don't talk about it. Don't show your ankle. You know, they didn't like the body. They covered up. This is the age of Queen Victoria, when the Victorian model of, you did not talk about these things. This is the time when Walt Whitman's poetry was banned in many states because it was pornographic. Okay. Now, the idea was, they said, men have a role and women have a role. Men go out into the work world and they earn money and they do whatever horrible thing they have to do in our capitalist society. Dog eat dog. Eric, just listen to my lecture, please. You can talk to Amanda all during lunch. Okay. Now, stop talking. Women, on the other hand, went ahead and they got married and became mothers. And that was the model. What was the model for a woman? It was to become a middle-class housewife and a mother. You didn't have to work. You could go ahead and be the conscience of the family. You were the virtuous person. Your husband, God knows, he might have blood on his hands from what he had to do to make money, but you did not do that. You were the soul of the family. You were the better person. You were the better person. They really did consider that women were better, right? And that's why feminists of the time said women should have the vote. Why should women have the vote? Because they are less corrupt than men. They're better morally than men. They will make better choices. And if you give women the vote in elections, you'll have less corruption in your society because women are less corrupt. Whether that's true or not is open to interpretation, but that's what they felt at the time. Women are not the people who drink, right? It's the men who drink. So if you give women more of a voice in politics, then we can ban alcohol and we can have less alcoholism and have a better society. We'll have progress. We'll make progress towards a better future. So what do you see here? The push to go ahead and get women to vote, the suffragettes, and also the Women's Christian Temperance Union, and the move to go ahead and get rid of alcohol, to ban alcohol. This is taking place at the state level, and then ultimately at the same time that women get the vote all throughout the country, they make alcohol illegal all throughout the country. Twin points of the same feminine progressive reformers. Okay? And then you have this lady right here, Carrie Nation. Carrie Nation was this old lady who would go to bars, and believe it or not, she would do this. She would make sure a couple journalists were there, right, to watch this whole thing, and then she would walk in there, and right before she walked into the bar, she'd go like this. She'd go, Jesus Christ, please give me strength to walk into this bar and close this den of iniquity, this place of sinfulness. Amen. Then she'd walk up and she'd say, Sir, will you please, in the name of everything which is good and righteous, will you please go ahead and close your bar and never open it again? And what would you say? This is my place of business. Go away, lady. And then she would go ahead and take out a hatchet and start attacking the whole place. She is a home defender. She's a home defender, right? She'd actually like these little hatchets. She'd sell them for money. Like get a autographed Carrie Hatchet thing here. In fact, I told you about that bar that I went to in San Antonio when I was grading AP exams, where Teddy Roosevelt would recruit his Rough Riders. They actually had a part of the bar which had a big chunk in it. And that was where Carrie Nation had gone ahead and attacked their bar. And of course, they kept the thing, and it was like a famous landmark. Now, this is where Carrie Nation tried to kill our bar, and it's there, and they put a little plaque next to it. They probably made the bar more valuable rather than closing it. But they were proud of it, and you can see here is where Carrie Nation came there. So what would happen? Usually she wouldn't go ahead and attack the whole place. She'd just take one good whack at the bar, and then she'd be arrested. They would take her out, and the journalists were writing the whole thing. And as they're arresting her, she'd be saying, did you get that down? You make sure that's in the newspaper tomorrow, as a way of raising consciousness and trying to go ahead and spread energy about this drive to go ahead and make alcohol illegal. This is a feminist issue, right? This is going back to the Second Great Awakening and Elizabeth Cady Stanton and the Declaration of Sentiments at Seneca Falls. The whole thing is beginning to go ahead and bear fruit 50 years after it started. Yeah?
Is it because like the women got the vote and they use that power to...
And also because a huge chunk of the male population was in Europe fighting World War I and couldn't vote. Yeah. Okay, think of this silent movie here. Here you have a cop, of course, drinking on duty, right? Stereotype of corrupt cops in that time. Here you have an Irishman with a shovel building railroads. He's going to get a bucket of beer. He's got a pipe. He's the stereotype of the drunken Irishman. So what are we going to do? In come the suffragettes. Beat up the Irishman. Take out your hatchet.
Whoa. Oh.
The guy gets his seltzer bottle. Get rid of him. The cop's trying to sneak out of there.
Free drink.
Good times, right? Good times. Get rid of alcohol. Okay? And again, the whole idea was, the body's bad. Do not talk about the body. Don't show it, right? In fact, there was kind of a feeling that a lot of women had difficulty because there was too much sex in the land, right? In fact, there was this, and Mrs. Kinder's going to go ahead and read the yellow wallpaper with you, and she can take this whole thing much deeper, but there's this feeling that women oftentimes had these outbreaks of mental illness. They were suffering from depression or hysteria, hysterectomy, like a female, hysteria, like a female disease in its very name, right? And the idea was that we could have less of this mental illness if there was less sex going on, right? It's bad enough that we have to do it to have children, but beyond that, why should you ever really be having sex? So oftentimes they would push the men to go ahead and put less stress on their wives to have sex. Because supposedly the problem was the men wanted to have sex all the time, and they're driving their wives literally crazy, right? So men, married and unmarried, especially unmarried men, would take a vow to not have any sex outside of marriage and to have as little sex as possible. For example, they would go ahead and plead to go ahead and take the white life, or become Knights of the Silver Crown. And this supposedly was going to go ahead and lead to happier women with men who had more control of their baser instincts. And you see this whole idea. The men, they gamble, they drink, they want to have sex, they're base, they're kind of crude, they do whatever they want in the economic world to make money. The women were the higher objects, and they're able to control these things. And they would go ahead, supposedly, and make the country more pure, right? For example, women would oftentimes hold up signs saying, lips that touch alcohol will never touch these lips, using pressure to get the menfolk to not drink. You want to date me? You can't drink at all, right? Using their power in that way. On the other hand, you could sit there and see plenty of feminists saying the women are going crazy because they don't only have the opportunity to do anything but besides be a mother and a housewife. And maybe they're not getting enough sex, right? For example, who can tell me, what is the first college for women in this country? The first college is Vassar.
Yeah,
Vassar University was the first one to go ahead and have women be undergrads. And that was a big deal. What they did with the first class is bring in lots of doctors. Because we need to go ahead and watch these young ladies very closely. Because doing higher level math, they might do some kind of permanent damage to their brain. Women are more fragile, they're more delicate. You need to go ahead and be careful with them, including college. Which I think is amazing because it's like kind of my job to throw anything I can at young women in this class and see if they'll break. Right? In those days, it was like, no, they'll break. You've got to be careful with them. You've got to be careful with them. Now, the reality was that this whole idea of the Victorian century, of like very rigid sex roles, was beginning to break down. Okay? But just the very beginnings of the breakdown, right? You had some women going to college. You had more and more women entering into the workforce, especially with regards to secretarial jobs. The telephone, paperwork, there was a whole new careers in these kind of things would support big factories, and women could work there. Most, department stores, you could actually for the first time go into a Sears Roebuck store and see this place, and women worked there in the retail. The Sears Roebuck catalog was a big deal because of the railroad. You could order things from these department stores, and they would actually bring it to you from the catalog, and they would mail it to you along the railroad. But most women had jobs as domestic servants. Right? This is the era before washing machines, dishwashers, or things which would wash your clothes. There was a lot of work to be done inside the household. So you had domestic servants, Irish immigrants, things like that, and they would do all the work. Now the ideal was this. You'd be a stay-at-home mom and a wife, a middle-class person, right? That's the ideal. The reality was most women worked because they had to, and most women were servants, although there were other jobs opening up for them. And if you were really ambitious, you could actually aspire to be someone like Jane Addams, right? Jane Addams was a woman who never got married. She never had children. She did socially important work in Chicago, working with the poor at Hull House. She went ahead and was a person who could do meaningful work and have a career and do things in the social world, which were important besides just being a mother and a wife. So people could sit there and say, maybe I'll go to a big city. Maybe I'll work in a settlement house and do something like that. Jane Addams was a little bit of a role model for young women. So it's the beginning of the breakdown of very, very strict roles for women. All right. So there, you're going to go ahead and see all these things here with Mrs. Kindred. Okay. You can see right here, the beginning of the women getting degrees. Bachelor degrees, it's increasing. The same thing with graduate degrees. You have more and more people getting advanced degrees. What's that?
It's like two people skipped masters and went to doctor.
They went straight and got their PhD, right? Before this, there was almost none. Were there any lawyers or doctors in 1905 who were women? Almost none. Okay, the 1950s and 60s is when that began to break down. But it's the beginning. All right. Now, again, the end result is women are going to get the vote in 1920, the same time as alcohol is outlawed. You can see right here, some states had already given the women the vote before 1920. The 19th Amendment actually goes ahead and makes it legal for women to vote. But the West was the place where you had the most progressiveness in that way. The West was the place where women got the vote at the state level way before 1920. The East and the South was the most conservative place where women were the latest to get the vote. For example, South Carolina, women only got the vote there because the federal amendment made it legal throughout the entire country. That state never actually made it legal at the state level. Okay, so in some ways, the very pinning achievements of the progressive reform movement are getting the vote and making alcohol illegal in 1920. Yeah?
What's partial woman suffrage? As in, what do you mean by partial?
Okay, for example, in 1912, you can vote at the state level for your governor, but you can't vote for a senator because that's a federal election. So the law says you can vote in the state level for issues, but you can't vote on federal things. There's no federal law saying that everyone in the entire country has to vote if they're a woman. Make sense?
Okay.
So the states, for example, here,